there's no instant fix. There just isn't. And so if somebody's promising you, or you see a review that says, in 24 hours, my skin did X or Y, it's just the moisturizer in there that made them look better. It's just the emulsion in there. It's not the active ingredient. They take time to work.
Hi, skin friend. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of The Skin Reel. This week, you are in for a treat. I have my colleague, board-certified dermatologist, Dr. Lindy Fox, on. She is a professor of clinical dermatology at the University of California, San Francisco, where she spends her time on the consultative service, taking care of patients who are in the hospital for either really severe skin conditions or skin conditions arising from their medical problems. And these can be really sick patients, and they really need a lot of expertise and skilled dermatologic care. But she also began suffering with sensitive skin and contact dermatitis or allergies to her skincare products many years ago. And she felt like there's just this lack of luxurious, but still sensitive skin and hypoallergenic skincare products on the market. So she is now a co-owner and co-founder of Vetted Derm Lab, which is a hypoallergenic skincare company. So she has really delved into the world as a skincare creator and having her own skincare company, into the whole world of skincare and marketing and product formulation and all of that stuff. And so today we are going to talk about this term, clean beauty. It's something that we hear thrown around all the time, and people talk about, is it clean? And what does that really mean, right? Do you know? I know it's super, super confusing. So that is why I'm so glad to have her on as both a dermatologist, a beauty brand creator, and really pick her brain on what is this term clean beauty and what does it really mean for you? If you are interested in clean beauty, because honestly, is there anyone who's going to say they're interested in dirty beauty? I don't think so. You're definitely going to want to stick around. Dr. Fox, I'm so excited to have you on. I have been looking forward to this episode for a long time because this is a topic that really just is so much confusion. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much.
It's such a pleasure to be here. So excited to help dispel some myths and help explain some of the things I've learned about this journey that I've been on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have so much knowledge to impart, but can we just start at the beginning? Like, just tell us, I introduced you briefly in the intro, but I'd love for the audience to hear in your own words who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your skincare company.
Great. So it's going to seem like two totally different worlds have collided, which is kind of the way it really is. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about both worlds. The first part of my dermatology life and career has been focused on complex medical dermatology and inpatient dermatology. So the way I describe this is if you're sick and you go to the hospital and something's wrong with your skin, there's a group of dermatologists who like to be in the hospital setting who manage severe skin conditions that are a result of your reason for hospitalization or skin conditions that have become so severe that they require hospitalization. So lots of real severe conditions that are kind of gnarly to look at, really fun to take care of, and we do a lot of saving lives in the world of dermatology. But then somewhere along the way, I developed rashes that I didn't understand and I couldn't make better. And even though I considered myself a pretty good dermatologist, I could not figure out what was going on. So I spoke to my colleague and now one of my business partners and co-founder, Mina, and I said, I think I might have a contact dermatitis. Can you please patch test me? And she said, sure. So for those people who don't know what patch testing is, it's very different from what you might expect an allergist to do in terms of testing. Patch testing is looking for ingredients that your body comes into contact with from the outside, like onto your skin. And to specific ingredients, you get a rash. And there are specialists within dermatology who can help figure out what those ingredients and chemicals specifically are. And so she patch tested me, and we found out that I was allergic to a lot of common allergens. And then I turned around and said to her, okay, so what can I use? And she said, well, you can use X and Y, really common recommendations from dermatologists, which are great products. But what I recognized, the immediate feeling that I had is that I was being excluded from the experience of using something that felt luxurious or a treat or having the experience of a beautiful bottle on my counter, and also knowing that that product was completely safe for me to use. And we realized there was a big gap in the market, that I couldn't be the only person that felt that I wanted something that I could feel was safe and elegant and efficacious at the same time. And that shouldn't dermatologists be the people making that decision? We know a lot about ingredients. We know a lot about skin. We're the expert in those aspects of the skincare world. And why are we not the ones doing that? So that's sort of the whole story from the beginning to the end.
There does seem to be this disconnect between sort of like I'm a drugstore. Skincare to me is not like, I don't like to spend a lot of time doing it, but I know that there are so many people who love it. I mean, even my children love it. And they want to have that attractive bottle, and they want it to feel good, and they want to feel like, yeah, like this is like a special treat kind of spa experience for them. And unfortunately, a lot of the products like that are not created by dermatologists. They can be very allergenic to people and not efficacious. So yeah, I love that there's dermatologists saying, wait a minute, we can actually have both. We don't just have to stick with like the bare minimal the minimum if you don't want that. So I think that's wonderful. And yeah, I totally commend you as a consult dermatologist. I went to the Harvard dermatology program, and those consult months were really, really intense. And I remember just hearing your name as well, like, well, in San Francisco at UCSF, Dr. Fox and her team. So I think sometimes people are surprised, like some of the skin stuff that we are called to take care of. It's really amazing. And yeah, it's a great opportunity for learning as a resident. So totally two different worlds, right? But I love that. Yeah, that's what dermatology is. We treat such a range of conditions. So that's really, really cool. Well, what I really wanted to talk about today is this concept of clean beauty, right? Like this term is everywhere. So I'm going to first ask you to tell me, what does that word really mean?
Honestly, the word clean beauty means absolutely nothing. And that's a huge problem. That is actually the problem, because it's going to mean different things to different people. And if you look at, for example, when you're doing a product brief, when you're creating a product, the manufacturing company or your chemist will say to you, well, do you want to be Sephora clean, EWG clean, Target clean? So there is no real definition of clean. So I think it's very important that consumers understand that clean does not have a real definition. It can mean to people that something is vegan and not that there's no testing on animals, that it's according to what maybe certain standards along, I don't know, for example, like EWG, which there are issues with those standards, and they're not generally widely accepted by the medical profession as a marker of clean. And there's a lot of fear-mongering in what is clean and what isn't. So when we set out to create Vetted, what we did is we made sure that we were defining clean as a dermatologist would define it. And that actually means we know what ingredients make people's skin sick. We know, as you know, when they come to your office and they're using lots of different products with lots of different potentially problematic ingredients, that some are more likely than others to cause problems on the skin. And then, in fact, the reason you have your rash is not because you're not paying attention to the products that you're using. It's because there's something in there making your skin sick. So wouldn't it be amazing and empowering if you knew that you could pick something off the shelf and you knew that it was environmentally friendly, that the ingredients were sourced sustainably, that it was packaged in glass so you wouldn't be leaching phthalates, so that it would also be recyclable, and so that a dermatologist also knows which ingredients to keep out and make sure that there's a very clear standard of which ingredients are excluded and included. Our exclusion list is enormous. It's actually very hard to work with. Our inclusion list is very small. While there is no definition of clean, if you really want to be as stringent as possible, you would use all of these criteria as a consumer when you're evaluating a product. But that knowledge is very hard to come by. And it's not really widely or reasonably available.
I feel like this term, it's thrown around all the time. It's really like a marketing term, right? And if someone were to come up to you or come up to me and say, do you want clean beauty or unclean beauty? Like, no one's going to say, no, I want the dirty beauty. I want the pollutants and the toxins. I want all of that, right? Like, of course we want clean beauty. And I think most people want a safe product. I mean, I know I would love to buy from companies that are trying to help the environment and be, ethical, and a good company that treats their employees well, like all of these things, right? But it's hard to know. And just because it says clean on the bottle, unfortunately, does not mean it's hitting all those marks that you think it is. And is this true or not, that, some of these companies like the EWG, the Environmental Working Group, you can pay to get their seal of approval. So it's almost like this like money-making thing for them to get their seal of approval. And it doesn't even really mean anything.
I mean, when we're talking about marketing, I want to jump into that a little bit more, because the other marketing terms that get thrown around that are very confusing: dermatologist approved. That doesn't mean anything. Which dermatologist? Who decided? And what are the criteria for approval or not? Medical grade. Medical grade doesn't mean anything. There's either prescription or non-prescription. That's it, right? So there's over-the-counter and there's prescription. So when medical grade should mean that it's a prescription product, that it has to come from our pharmacy. So that doesn't mean anything. Clinically proven. The criteria for being clinically proven is actually very low. The hypoallergenic label is also a marketing label. All that means is that you've sent it out for patch testing through a lab for 50 or more people to try it, and that in a specific short period of time, those 50 people didn't get a reaction to it. But that's not a wide enough number to actually prove that something is truly hypoallergenic. So a lot of these terms get thrown around and seem to be a seal of approval of some sort, but they actually mean very little in terms of the criteria that have to be met to get that stamp of approval.
And is it because these products are just not regulated like medicines by the FDA? Is that why? Like, are we ever going to get guidelines or standard terms to be used?
100%, because we have no regulation over these ingredients. There is an effort called MOCRA, which has now started, where if there is an adverse event, it does need to be reported, even if you're just an over-the-counter, sort of off-the-shelf kind of beauty product. That does have to be reported. And that data over time will be collected into a database and will actually serve to help guide us. But we're way behind in terms of safety and ingredients when you compare our ingredient opportunity lists to those that are available in Europe.
I mean, this is overwhelming, right? Like what, I know when I look at something that says dermatologist approved or hypoallergenic, I feel like a little like sigh of relief, like, okay, my people have vetted this, right? So what can the average consumer, what should we be looking for?
It's a great question. And I wish it was easier to do. And I will be completely honest. I was really great at managing severe life-threatening skin conditions, but I did not know how to read a product label until I actually had to know what I had to exclude. And so I think there is a list of ingredients that we should look to avoid. And I just want to step back for a minute and explain why. So there's a concept called a sensitizer. A sensitizer is an ingredient, a chemical, that given enough exposure to the skin over time will result in, or can result in, a rash on the skin. And there are ingredients that are more common than others and are known to do that. And so there's actually a list of common sensitizers. And that list can empower you to know what are the ingredients that I should look to avoid in my products. So some of the really most common ones are fragrances. There is just no reason that your moisturizer needs to have a fragrance, and then your cleanser has to have a fragrance, and also my vitamin C has to have a fragrance. They're unnecessary and they are potentially problematic. So if 1 in 5 Americans has an allergic contact dermatitis, and that's in the millions of people, and if fragrances in personal care products are the most common reason for that, that's an easy thing to avoid. So you can see if someone's thing's fragranced, maybe you want to pick a version that is fragrance-free. The second important point is that fragrance-free is not the same thing as unscented. There are fragrances that are used to mask unwanted scents in chemicals, and it may not smell like anything. So when you buy something, you want it to actually say fragrance-free, not simply unscented. That's a very important differentiation point. And then the very, very common sensitizers that are being phased out in the US, but are still present, are those that are called MI and MCI, methyl isothiazolinone and methylchloral isothiazolinone. That's one of the ones I'm allergic to. It was in Neutrogena Ultra Sheer sunscreen that I loved, and there it was, and I'd been using it for a decade, and I eventually developed an allergy to it. That's a very common one. Propylene glycol is a preservative, also is a hides, as the name propranolol. That's a very common one that should be looked for and avoided. Formaldehyde and formaldehyde releasers are other common ones. And then another hidden one that we love to see in our skincare products because it's a great antioxidant is vitamin E, also called tocopherol. But that is on the top list of allergens by the group that decides, what they're seeing in their clinics that actually makes the list of the top allergens. So that's in there too.
Well, I do Mohs surgery, and people they always want to ask me, can I rub vitamin E on my scar? And I'm like, let's not, let's don't do that. Let's just keep it really simple. But can you speak to the fact, like people will tell me, I've been using this, or I'll tell them, don't use Neosporin, right? Like dermatologists, we always say, don't use Neosporin because of the neomycin can cause an allergic reaction. And they'll say, but I've been using it for decades. I've been using it for years without a problem. Why is it that for you've been using it for so long? Why did all of a sudden you get a rash?
I love that question. It comes up all the time. Thank you for asking it. It is such an important piece of information that is somewhat counterintuitive, but when you think about the biology of it, it actually makes a lot of sense. So in order for your body to be able to mount an immune reaction, it has to have seen, your immune cells have to have seen that ingredient or that chemical to develop the reaction to it. And the more you see an ingredient, the more likely you are to develop a reaction to it. And if you're an ingredient that is a common sensitizer, meaning that you tend to aggravate immune systems a lot, you add those two things together, you use it a lot, and it's a common sensitizer, you're much more likely to get a problem with it. So think about poison oak, depending on where you are in the country, poison ivy, poison sumac. The first time you touch it, nothing happens to you. The second time you touch it, maybe nothing happens to you. But the third time you touch it, you'll probably get a rash at 72 hours. The fourth time, the fifth time, you get a rash even sooner. And that's because your memory immune cells have learned that they're allergic to that ingredient or that chemical when it comes into contact with the skin. It's a learned process.
I did sort of a self-study on myself when I was in medical school. I don't have very sensitive skin, and I usually can handle things pretty easily. But, every now and then I'll go to a hotel and if I forgot my soap, which I try not to, my cleanser, and I use theirs, and of course it smells delicious and everything, but then my eyes are burning. But when I was in medical school, I had a lip plumper from, like Sephora, and I put it on my lips. First day seemed fine. Second time I put it on, a little burning, a little tingling. I was like, oh, they're plump. They're getting a little swollen. And then I really got a rash to it. And so I decided a week later, I'm going to try it one more time just to see if it really was this lip plumper. And sure enough, my lips just blew up, exploded. So like each time I used it, it got worse and worse. And I wish I had looked at the label because now I'm curious what it was that was in there. But yeah, I think sometimes people think, if you're allergic to it, it's going to happen the first time. But actually with this type of allergic reaction, this contact allergic reaction, it's a delayed hypersensitivity, right? So it happens after multiple exposures. So just because you've used it before doesn't mean it can't cause a problem.
The other point that I think can be very empowering for people to know is that you can actually test your products yourself. And the way we recommend this in the dermatology clinic, this, is you put that ingredient in the same spot, usually on the upper inner arm, or you can do it in the fold of your elbow, every single day, even under a Band-Aid's better, for 2 weeks. And if you get a rash, not from the adhesive of the Band-Aid, but exactly where you put that ingredient, then it's likely you're allergic to it. So that's a way that you can test your common ingredients at home, and we call that home patch testing. And it's just something you can do without having to go to a doctor to see if you're having a problem with a skincare product. It doesn't tell you which ingredient in that product, but it's a way for you to test your home product.
Sounds like I should have done that with my lip plumper, just tested it on my arm instead of my lip. So
You knew exactly what was happening.
I was kind of curious, my self-study. Well, one thing you did not mention, and this is not a sensitizer, right? But I feel like we can't have a discussion about skincare products without talking about parabens. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because it seems like everyone has removed them, that, people are worried that they're endocrine disruptors are causing cancer. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the problem is that there's a lot of fear mongering around these ingredients and how much is actually getting into your system if you put it on your skin. Now, we're not talking about eating it. We're not talking about in food products. We're not talking about it in containers that hold food products, right? We're talking about going on your skin. And so it gets a little murky. We do understand that parabens can be endocrine disruptors. And what that means is that there may be an interruption of the normal flow of hormones to create an imbalance that leads to a specific overproduction or mimicking of hormones in your body. How much that's actually happening from skincare products going on your skin is, I think, somewhat debatable. We keep them out because there's actually no reason to have them. But we make a much bigger stink, if you look at our website, for example, on the things that we have tried and true evidence, very well done studies by experts in the field of what does cause problems on the skin. And we're much more vocal and passionate about those ingredients than we are, for example, parabens. But that said, it's a little bit of a murky spot.
Right. And to your point, too, about probably these sensitizers in your skincare are going to cause more of an actual issue than this sort of theoretical risk that may or may not happen with parabens in your moisturizer, right? So we've talked about things to avoid those sensitizers. Are there certain ingredients we should look for in our skincare products?
The way I would think about this is sort of the question. I'm sure you get this every day. You're about to leave the room and someone says to you, but what should I really use on my skin? What are the things that I should really use? And that was part of our thinking in what we chose to create for Vetted for our line. I think simple is key. I think one of the problems that we see happen is that there's a lot of marketing out there and a lot of promises being made, and there's a lot of movement and new ingredients and people wanting to try things. And a lot of those, for example, active ingredients added onto each other can end up being rather irritating to the skin. You may not actually have an allergy. You may have an irritation and barrier disruption from them. So the first thing we all want to do as dermatologists is make sure that our barrier is intact, right? So that we have a really healthy top layer of our skin, keeps the bad stuff out, the good stuff in. So that's a gentle moisturizer. You want to try and keep away from very strong or overly drying kinds of surfactants, but you want to use a gentle cleanser. Then you want to use a bland moisturizer. So what does a bland moisturizer mean? It means that fewer actives, really good emollients in there, things that replace good moisturizing components of the skin, phospholipids, ceramides, cholesterol, for example, glycerin, squalane. Those are all great moisturizing ingredients, great humectants that can do a very good job with very little risk of irritation. So your barrier is nice and sealed. And then you get the look, well, that's it? What else? What else? So vitamin C and retinoid, I think, are the things that we say are, the part of the skincare routine that you should be looking for. We know, and I think that our community of skincare enthusiasts and skin enthusiasts are very well versed in the different retinoids, and from over-the-counter versions to prescription versions, as well as the different vitamin C options. Vetted chose to use a very mild over-the-counter retinoid because we're formulated for patients with sensitive skin or people with sensitive skin. So that's hydroxypinocolone retinoate. The reason we like it is because it binds directly to the retinoic acid receptor, just like tretinoin does, yet it's not irritating. And so it's a great over-the-counter option. But in general, if you're looking for something that is anti-aging, even can help reverse signs of skin damage, I wouldn't say reverses precancerous change, but definitely helps in that direction, you need to have a retinoid. Vitamin Cs are great for fighting the pollutants in the air, fighting free radicals, that kind of oxidative change that can happen in the skin and promote aging, brightening the skin. And that's sort of the morning component, and the retinoid is the evening component. And then you have to have a sunscreen. Those are the things you really want to be looking for. I try to keep things simple because I find it very confusing to walk into a place that sells skincare products and trying to figure out, what do I need? What do I don't? What's just noise?
100%. I mean, I get overwhelmed, right? And I'm a board certified dermatologist, right? And I always just have to tell myself, like, these companies, like, they're constantly trying to reinvent the wheel or sell you something new. And, like, find something that works for you and stick with it. That's another thing I find. People are so quick to bounce around with products that you don't really give it time to work, and that it could have been a really effective product for you, but you didn't see the results you wanted in a month or 2 weeks, right? And you've moved on to the next one. And then the other issue is like when you do too much and then you're damaging that skin barrier, you're not meaning to, right? You think you're doing all the right things, but you're maybe over exfoliating and you're using your retinoid too often or with too many other actives. So yeah, I love that. Just keeping it simple. And people, yeah, like I get a look of shock, like, oh, come on, like what are you leaving out? Right.
We really aren't. And I just want to go back to that one piece that you said, and I want to double down on it. There's no instant fix. There just isn't. And so if somebody's promising you, or you see a review that says, in 24 hours, my skin did X or Y, it's just the moisturizer in there that made them look better. It's just the emolliation in there. It's not the active ingredient. They take time to work. And you've got to really give it that time to see the efficacy, and the consistency is key. It's kind of like working out to build muscles. You're not going to build them on day one, but if you stick with it every day, you will change your body shape. It's the same idea.
Find quality ingredients and actives, things that you need for your skin. That's another thing I'll find. A woman was going over her skincare routine with me, right? Because like people always want to get your thoughts on it. And she was using a lot of products for acne prone skin. I was looking at her skin. I'm like, doesn't look like you have acne. Do you struggle with acne? She's like, no. I'm like, well, why are you using all these things for acne, right? So just because your best friend uses it or celebrity, gorgeous celebrity X uses it, doesn't mean it's right for you or you need it. So you really need to just like kind of cancel out the noise in a lot of ways and just stick with what your skin needs and be consistent and quality ingredients. And the fragrance thing too, it's not like we're trying to not be fun or make skincare luxurious, right? But my kids love fragrance, like their shampoo smells, and at least I get them no fragrance and like their moisturizer, cleanser, and sunscreen. But I was talking with Dr. McGinnis, who's a pediatric dermatologist, on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about how mango, I think she was saying mango is one of the top allergens, and rosemary, because at rosemary's and everything. And I love it, smells amazing, right? But your baby doesn't need to smell like that. You don't need to smell like that. And then the mango, we're kind of sensitizing ourselves to the same chemical that is in poison ivy, urushiol, that can be in the mango pit and peel. And so by constantly having things that smell like mango, you are kind of sensitizing yourself to the same thing that's in poison ivy. So you just have to be careful. Just because it smells delicious or just because you like to eat it, maybe you don't need to put it on your skin.
Yeah, and lavender's another one. Lavender's a really common one. And then some essential oils. I should have said that when you said what to avoid. Oh my goodness, that should have been my number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dermatologists call essential oils the devil. I literally do. They're very, very sensitizing. Sometimes what happens is patients will come in and they think they're using all the right stuff because it says natural. It's natural. It's from Whole Foods. It's from Trader Joe's. And I think it's very important to understand that plants are very strong potential allergens. They are very strong sensitizers. Poison oak is a plant. And poison ivy is a plant. And so while we think we're doing something great, and more natural, the truth is that we may be creating a bigger problem for ourselves when we start to add plant-based or botanical-based ingredients into our skincare products.
Absolutely. That's another one of those like marketing terms, right? You see natural and you're like, oh, that sounds great. Yes, I want to look natural. I want to be natural. Like I want to help the environment. But natural doesn't always mean better. And a lot of times with skincare, it's going to set you up for allergic reactions and irritation, even though it is, yes, natural. So yeah, I would add that word to your marketing, what marketing ploys, right, that people fall for, right?
I mean, I can also think of the bakuchiol, for example, as a great ingredient, right? That's a new up and coming plant-based retinoid. So people who prefer to use natural or plant-based products and may choose bakuchiol, and it's actually safe in pregnancy. Great, except bakuchiol, as new as it is, still has quite a few reports of allergic contact dermatitis to it, which is why we didn't choose to use it. So a lot of the information comes out after that ingredient is introduced into the market. And it's only after exposure to that ingredient over time does the experience start to catch up and the data start to be produced that we understand something to be an allergen. So vitamin E is a good example. Limonene and linalool are great examples there, and absolutely everything. It's almost impossible to find hair care products without limonene and linalool in them, and I'm allergic to both, so I know. So yeah, keeping the terpene derivatives and the plant-based derivatives out is generally a good rule.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and retinoic acid is natural, right? Like that's a natural, but it doesn't sound natural, right? Like it sounds, to say bakuchiol, that sounds way more natural, but these things are still natural. We're just pulling out exactly what we need rather than just smashing the plant right on your face or whatever, some of these DIY products, right, that people do. You had mentioned earlier talking about your products are in glass. So that's not something we often see. So is there a risk with our beauty products being in plastic?
Great question. There are several issues with plastic. One is hard plastic is often not actually really recyclable. So that was really a nod to the environment. There are some literature about phthalates being leached out of plastics into the product. And if we're trying to keep our actual product that touches your skin as pure as possible, putting it in glass allows the elimination of the question of, did something leach out of the plastic into my product? Am I being exposed to something post-production that was never intended to be there? And that's really the only way to control for that, is to put as little plastic in your packaging as you can. And that was, I'd say just as important to us as the sustainability piece. With glass, also, to be frank, comes the risk of breakage on the way to you. That happens, and that's just something we have to deal with. And it might not be a great idea to put the cleanser bottle in the shower, because if it breaks, you now have glass in your shower. So there are, of course, downsides to using glass, but it is really a big part of our sustainability model. The other option could be aluminum. That is also actually an option for your packaging that will keep in what's supposed to be in and out what's supposed to be out.
Plastic is everywhere. Like it makes me sick how much like plastic in the medical field, like how everything's yes, it has to be clean, right? So we sort of have our hands tied, but I just see so much plastic and waste, and it really makes me sad. So I love when I see something not in plastic. And there's this really amazing doctor who's created non-plastic, like stainless steel plates and dinnerware for kids. I'm like, that's genius, right? Like, let's try to move away from some of the plastic that we see everywhere. But I get it, right? It's like, it's easy, it's convenient, it's probably more expensive for you to do glass, right? And send it out. But you sometimes have to weigh, well, in the long run, what's better for us. So I think that's really cool. And I'm sure the bottles look beautiful. So
yeah, they are beautiful. They're also heavy, so it costs more to send them. I think it's very important to do whatever you do with the utmost integrity, and you deciding what your mission is and deciding what are the things that are very important to you that you will not compromise on in order for you to feel good about what you're putting forward, whatever that is in any space in your life. And every change and every decision you make should be, matched up against those missions and integrity lineup. And it should always meet those criteria that you have set. And so sustainability was one of those pieces for us. And so we were willing to pay more. Being a startup, we're self-funded. Being a startup, we're going to pay more for our packaging. We're going to pay more to ship it out to you. If it breaks, we'll send you a new one, because it's just a really big part of why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, like your why, and yeah, that's like paramount. So that's great to hear. Where can people find Vetted?
We have a website, vetteddermlab.com. We are also launching, as we speak, on Amazon. So we can be found on Amazon as well. And then in some doctors' offices who may carry it, some doctors do, and we do sell out of doctors' offices if they're interested. One of the reasons we made Vetted, another one as I'm listing them through this podcast, is because we knew we were solving a problem that dermatologists had. So when a patient comes in and says, I have a problem, and maybe you don't have a patch tester where you live to help your patients figure out what they're allergic to, or your patient says to you, but I don't want to use CeraVe or Vanicream, that you have an option as a doctor to offer your patient. We made everything under $100 so it'd feel more accessible to everybody. That is still a high price point. I get it. But it does allow for more accessibility than some of the other doctor-based brands. The answering to the doctor problem that we were facing when we are trying to help our patients have access to something that we can trust, that was prepared and created by colleagues that were using criteria that we would use individually, was very important to us, as well as then giving to the consumer, to anybody out there who may not have a dermatologist. How can I access something that I can trust, that I know will be made safely, with care, with my values in mind, and understand that if I choose that, there's a very low likelihood that I will have an issue with it. It's never zero, but it's a very low likelihood. And so we wanted to empower both the physician and the consumer to be able to say, I have something for you, or I have something I can go get.
And I think having founders that are board certified dermatologists who know about these sensitizers, right? You're also a patient, right? Like, you know what it feels like to suffer with these rashes and sensitive skin and having trouble finding things. So yeah, that's where like the best products come, right, from a need. So that's really cool. And I will include that info in the show notes. But Dr. Fox, I could talk forever about clean beauty and all this stuff, but can you just leave anyone listening with like your top 3 takeaways, your top 3 misconceptions about clean beauty for people who are overwhelmed, right?
First of all, simpler is better. I think that's very important to take away. Stay simple. I would not use clean as a marker that you're using something safe for your skin. That isn't very meaningful. I would instead arm myself with the knowledge of what problematic ingredients are and what safe ingredients are. And a safe place to start is you can go to our website and you can read our blogs and you can go and look at our no list. You don't have to buy our product. You may just want to get educated there. There's a lot of educational material there. And the third part is that you're actually also empowered to test for yourself. You know, do your home testing if you think you might have a problem with something. There's a lot that you can do to figure out something is safe for you. So I'd love us to move away from the idea of what clean is by somebody else's definition, and rather make sure that we understand what is good for ourselves and our bodies and use the criteria that are out there to define that.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And we need more dermatologists like speaking out about this, right? And letting people know the truth. So I love that. It's such a great episode. I've learned a ton, and I can't wait to go to the vetted website and look at your products.
Oh my gosh, I'm sending you some. I'm sending you some immediately. I can't wait for you to try
You
it.
had me at glass bottles. I'm excited. And yeah, I'm like super basic and minimal, but when I find something I like, I stick with it. So Dr. Fox, has been a lot of fun. And can you just share again one more time where people can find you or follow you? I know Vetted has a lot of information on their website. Are you active on social media?
Yes, I'm on social media. Dr. Lindy Fox is my Instagram. Vetted Derm Lab is on Instagram. We're also on TikTok, the same names. So yes, you can find us there. And we do try to post informational material that people find helpful in their day-to-day lives. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
I'll include all of that, and we'll see everyone next week.